Nicholas Roerich was born in 19th century Russia, and he was a very precocious young man, very intelligent. His interests were far-ranging, but he especially was interested in Russian antiquities and in archaeology. In fact, made some important archaeological discoveries when he was still a young boy. He grew up to be a great artist. He was the person who was hired to do all the set work and the artwork for Igor Stravinsky's first performance of his Rite of Spring. He became well known after that for his paintings. His paintings are esoteric and occult because he was a theosophist, and he was attracted very strongly to Tibet and the idea of the masters in Tibet, and that the ancient wisdom that was kept on in isolation in Tibet. And he met the woman who would become his wife, Helena Roerich, who is in her own right a remarkable occultist and person, and we'll look more at her in this little documentary a little bit later. And they traveled in Tibet together. And matter of fact, their oldest son, I believe it was their oldest son, became quite a Tibetan scholar. And in their work in Tibet and in theosophy, they became internationally known, very, very famous. Roerich was a very strong believer in the legends of Buddhism about the coming new age of Maitreya, and the coming, the return, the legendary return of the king of Shambhala to overcome the forces of evil on the earth and unite humanity in a new and great humanity. And much of these themes are in his paintings. Now, you will find his paintings in the shrines and the altars of most esoteric people. I've mentioned that Rosamund Miller has on her altar, carved into her altar, one of the Roerich paintings. And I have in my sanctuary and altars the same. Roerich was responsible for many things in the United States because he grew to be very influential. One of his students was Henry Wallace, who was the vice president in the Roosevelt administration. People built Roerich in a beautiful art museum, which is still in New York to be found there. And it was Roerich who laid the foundation stone, or designed the foundation stone, and put a mysterious object into the stone that we'll talk about later for the United Nations building. It was he who also designed the Roerich Peace Pact, which the Germans signed, and during World War II it meant they did not destroy all the great European works of art. And he was nominated twice for the Nobel Peace Prize. He died before he could receive it. So Roerich is a very important person, both of the Roerichs, and we're going to learn something about them in this little series. Roerich was not only a great optimist about the future of humanity, but he felt that the United States was to be the protector and the esoteric community to represent all nations.
What a joy it is to see again the towers of New York. How often in the deserts of Asia, and especially in Tibet, we remember the skyscrapers, the Indian pueblos, and the ancient cities of Italy and Spain. The many storied Tibetan buildings evoke images of skyscrapers. The labyrinth of clay walls of the usual Asiatic home recall the pueblos of New Mexico and Arizona, eagleness of Italy and Spain. When I saw once more the towers of New York, I recall the joyous exclamations which the photographs of these strongholds of human achievement evoked in Asia. Never did we hear more enthusiastic admiration of the sight of postcards and photographs of New York than in the towns and nomad camps of Central Asia. The dwellers of clay houses and yurts, tore these souvenirs out of each other's hands and exclaimed, "This is the land of Shambhala." What more can a son of Asia say than this, his most sacred conception, in which are united all the hopes and aspirations? In prayer, Asia awaits Shambhala, this new era of mankind, and therefore such comparison of the Shambhala is indeed the highest praise. The inhabitants of Asia added, America is the Chichab over all countries, and Chichab means protector. How many reproductions of the towers of New York have remained in the desert, and they are kept in the most sacred corners where the most revered objects are collected. In the remote yurts of Asia's desert, President Hoover is the giant savior of starving peoples. Ford is considered a symbol of motive power. The Mongols consider American Indians their lost relatives. All our latest discoveries are regarded by the East as signs of the era of Shambhala. Millikan's cosmic ray, Einstein's relativity, Termin's music from the ether are regarded in Asia as signs of the evolution of human consciousness, confirmed by Vedic and Buddhist traditions and the teachings of Shambhala. According to these ancient teachings, the 40s of our century are regarded as the era of cosmic energy and the expanded consciousness. These touching memories rose before me when I again saw the towers of New York, and among old friends I noticed so many new strongholds which rose during the last 5 years. Such irresistible creation gives real joy. In the history of human achievement, America is an unique sample of prodigious progress. Not bound by conventionalities and old forms, without prejudice, America built its life with the powerful hands soil. America follows in its development the path of true progress. During the last few years, America stands alone in the creation of new museums, schools, societies, agencies, lectures, theaters. One is amazed at the colossal resources of the country, which absorbs this rich stream of creative power. Opportunity is also found both for the development of the national art as well as for collecting the treasures of the whole world. When you come from the mountains and deserts, where the best culture lies hidden in the shadow of centuries, the extraordinary growth of artistic and scientific work in America deeply amazes you and brings you great joy. The conquest of culture does not pass unnoticed. It creates that finesse of thought, the creative imagination, and the ability to perceive the new wave of progress. The era of happy attainments is predestined for America. Just as everything movable is attracted to the rapid motion of a great ship, so also is the irresistible development of America joined by the highest and the supreme.
In 1924, the Roerichs received a special stone. We don't know who gave it to them. It was a green stone. It was a meteoric stone. We don't know what it looked like, but he regarded it to be what he called the treasure of the world. You see him in this photograph holding a casket or box. On top of it, there is a replication of a mani stone, Om Mani Padme Hum, which is very common in Tibetan Buddhism. Lamas make these stones. They come from river beds and so on. However, in the box, he has this other stone. Now, esotericists and what we might say occult science fictionists thought it was a stone possibly from emissaries from the star Sirius, or that it was from the stone of Scone, which was used to crown the kings of Scotland and Ireland. However, whatever it was, he carried it around, and it figures very importantly in a lot of his paintings as an esoteric item of world salvation. Here I'm going to insert some clips from an occult documentary called The Secret Mysteries of America, not very scientific, that give us a little bit more, though, information that we want on the stone that Roerich had.
They're all people who had varying kinds of relations with Nicholas Roerich. They were channelers, they were followers. But to me, personally, greatest interest is this side statement that Aida Toskaya, who is also one of the curators of the Roerich Museum, wrote. Sina omits a piece of the stone that was placed in the casket. This goes back to that famous stone that the Roerichs became a cause célèbre because of, and many other people wrote about later. Everything changed once they received this. The 1924 marked a whole new direction for them all, and this came about, I think, this is 1924. You'll see the casket here is the same casket there.
And this is a burning casket of some kind.
Yeah, Chintamani. Chintamani is a Sanskrit term that means a stone of wisdom, that he calls the treasure of the world. And that's how he depicted the treasure of the world, the ultimate treasure of the world.
We find this casket portrayed in many of the paintings. Chintamani meant a treasure, a jewel, like Om Mani Padme Hum and so on. The Chintamani is a term that Roerich, you may have heard and noticed earlier, used of the United States of America. He felt it was the jewel of the world. This is the casket that he carried this treasure in. It was kept, I believe, now at Manly Hall's Philosophical Research Library. Of course, it does not have any of the contents now. They've been put into the cornerstone of the building. Roerich referred to the stone as the lapis exilis, the wandering stone, a term similar to terms used for the philosopher's stone and for the stone that supposedly was carried by the Knights Templar, according to Eschenbach's story and so on. We're going to take a look at a little bit more of the conspiracy theory information here, just to get us some more background. Note that the conspiracy theorists depict the stone as triangular shaped so that they can make it look like it fits as the capstone of the pyramid on the dollar bill, which we'll be talking about. However, there is no evidence that it was that shape. In fact, it's probable that it was the same shape as a mani stone and was inscribed like a mani stone. It was a sacred stone from Tibet, possibly by a very high Tibetan Lama with a great blessing on it.
And it seems to be a contraction of several words in the Eschenbach example, but clearly in Roerich's example, lapis exilis means the exiled stone or the wandering stone or the stone that comes in from somewhere else.
The word lapis is simply Latin for the stone. But how was this stone envisioned by Roerich and his disciple Henry Wallace? Roerich described the stone as a type of moldavite, the meteoric stone of green or emerald color. This would seem to fit with the description given by von Eschenbach in the 12th century. On his website, dedicated to the stone's history, Freemason Gavin Wintz came to this conclusion about just what Nicholas Roerich envisioned as lapis exilis, the stone they call the Grail. Is it really possible that Roerich, Wallace, and even FDR believed the Great Seal was a representation of the Holy Grail? A portion of the Chintamani stone was given to the League of Nations, whose stated goals were the creation of a one-world civilization.
Aha, so now we see the League of Nations became the United Nations, and the United Nations is guilty of trying to make a new world order where we'll all have to work for our taskmasters and so on. Anyway, Roosevelt saw this old Masonic symbol, and he liked the Latin phrase Novus Ordo Secularum, which means the new order of the ages, which was something that was the early Masonic founders of the country considered the U.S. to be. And he said, oh my gosh, this can be translated as the New Deal, which is my political agenda. So this would be a great thing to have on the dollar bill. So the idea is that Roerich is actually the power behind the throne that moved Wallace, the vice president, to talk the president, Roosevelt, into putting this on the dollar bill. And it's really just code for the Illuminati world conspiracy to take over the world itself, which also includes the United Nations and Barack Obama and everyone else. So let's see how they present this, because there is some good information in some of the scenes I've selected here.
Roerich was considered not only a teacher, but a spiritual mentor and guru to Henry Wallace. It's believed that Wallace recommended the Great Seal to FDR because of the mystical influence Roerich held over him.
The dollar bill was approved with the all-seeing eye and the truncated pyramid with the all-seeing eye on the top of the because of Nicholas Roerich.
Wallace recollects that day in letters he wrote in 1951 and in 1955. He says, turning to page 53, I noted the colored reproduction of the reverse side of the seal. The Latin phrase Novus Ordo Seclorum impressed me as meaning the New Deal of the ages.
If in terms of the dollar, if there's a code about the New World Order, I think that they jumped a few decades from the New Deal, because the Novus Ordo Seclorum can be translated to the New Deal in English as easily and readily as to the New Order or the New World Order.
Initially, Wallace envisioned the Great Seal appearing on a coin. He took the idea to President Roosevelt.
So when Henry Wallace saw this booklet and saw this pyramid in the Iron Triangle, he was a Freemason. He was a member of a secret society. Immediately he said, whoa, what a symbol to have and not use. Let's use this. So it was he that went to the president, FDR, and FDR, being a Freemason, looked at those symbols and said, hey, yes, wow, this is, you know, that's New Order of the Ages. What's the New Deal? He actually thought to a degree that the new Novus Ordo Seclorum was the New Deal.
Wallace wrote that Roosevelt, as he looked at the colored reproduction of the seal, was first struck with the all-seeing eye, a Masonic representation of the great architect of the universe.
So in his era, Roerich was considered to be a great man, a theosophist, and a two-time nominee for the Pulitzer Prize. He was a great idealist about America and the future of America, but he's made out by 21st century conspiracy theorists to be an evil member of the Illuminati and a kind of Svengali who is responsible for Masonic imagery on the dollar bill. We're going to see something about Helena Roerich after we look at some of his paintings. Here are some of Roerich's esoteric paintings. The images he found of Maitreya in the Tibetan mountains. The images of travelers on the path. The images of divine beings. Helena Roerich, Nicholas Roerich's wife, was in every way as remarkable as he was. She was a woman of great education. She came from a background that was sophisticated, and she did many things in her interests with theosophy. For example, she translated all the works of Blavatsky into Russian. We're going to see a little video about her that was put together that I took down from the internet. Before that, I want to read to you from something that she wrote. Helena developed as what we call a higher triad psychic. In other words, not a lower astral psychic who channels the dead and things like that, but one who actually brings through the teachings of masters. And the master that she worked with was named Moria, and together they brought through all the works that are today known as the works of Agni Yoga, the earliest of which were the works of that were entitled The Leaves of Moria's Garden. And these were written about the same time and channeled about the same time as they received the mysterious stone. This was in 1924. So what I'm going to do is read to you from the second book of The Leaves of Moria. I'm going to read an allegorical story that was told by Moria and that was then painted by Nicholas. And the image that you're going to see is the image that you find on the front of Rosamund Miller's altar. in Palo Alto, and an image that has been often copied and talked about. And you'll notice there are many strange things that happen in this story. For example, the moon phases don't work. It starts out with one phase and ends up the rest of the night in an entirely different phase. But it's an allegorical story. I'm going to read it to you. The star of Allahabad pointed out the way, and so we visited Sarnath and Gaya. Everywhere we found the desecration of religion. On the way back under the full moon occurred the memorable saying of Christ. During the night march the guide lost his way. After some seeking I found Christ seated upon a sand mound looking at the sands flooded by moonlight. I said to him, "We've lost the way. We must await the indication of the stars." Roerich, that's Moria, what is a way to us when the whole world is awaiting us? Then taking his bamboo staff, he traced a square around the impression of his foot, saying, "Verily I say, by human feet." And making the impression of his palm, he surrounded it also with a square, "Verily by human hands." Between the squares he drew the semblance of a pillar surmounted by an ark. He said, "Oh, how Aum shall penetrate into the human consciousness. Here I have drawn a pistol, and above it an ark, and have set the foundation in 4 directions. When by human feet and human hands the temple will be built, wherein will blossom the pistol laid by me, then let the builders pass by my way." Why should we await the way when it is before us? Then rising, he effaced with his cane all that he had drawn. When the name of the temple will be pronounced, then shall the inscription emerge. In remembrance of my constellation, the square and 9 stars shall glow over the temple. The sign of the foot and the hand shall be inscribed above the cornerstone. And thus he himself spoke on the eve of the new moon, and the heat of the desert was great. And then she goes on to say, say from Moria, "The star of the morning is the sign of the great epic which will flash as the first ray from the teaching of Christ. For who is to extol the mother of the world if not Christ, the one so demeaned by the world? Give us the arch of the dome wherein to enter." A little earlier in this same section, she has some other interesting things to say. The mother of the world appears as a symbol of the feminine origin in the new epic, and the masculine origin voluntarily returns the treasure of the world to the feminine origin. Amazons were the embodiment of the strength of the feminine principle, and now it is necessary to show the aspect of spiritual perfection of women. In the name of Christ, great crimes have been committed. Therefore Christ nowadays clothes himself in other garments. One must discard all the exaggerations. We are not speaking of slightly embellished works only, as even though the volumes of Origin corrections were skipped in. Therefore it is time to change conditions in the world. The springs cannot act before the appointed date, and to hasten the means to cut the wires. And again, by human hands must the temple be built. Helena Roerichs' writings of Agni Yoga, which are very extensive, are published by the Agni Yoga Society. It is said that in order to understand them in the unique language and terminology that she uses, they have to be read 3 times on 3 separate occasions. I've actually gone through the process of doing that and gained a great deal of understanding by so doing.
Helena was a spiritual adept, writer, seeker of truth, and the main inspiration behind the founding of the Agni Yoga Society. This society drew on Vedic and Buddhist traditions, as well as the writings of Madame Blavatsky and Theosophy. She was born to a well-to-do aristocratic family. Her father was architect-academician Ivan Shaposhnikov, and her mother was Ekaterina, born Gonelisheva Kutuzova, granddaughter of the great field marshal. Through her maternal line, Helena was a distant relative of the famous Russian composer M. Musorgsky. By the age of 7, Helena could read and write in 3 languages. She was also a brilliant pianist and received an extensive musical education. Helena met the young painter Nicholas Roerich in 1899 at the estate of her aunt, Princess Putyatina. They shared a deep spiritual bond and would marry 2 years later. She was a strong speaker on behalf of the equality of sexes. In March 1929 she wrote, "The approaching great epoch is closely connected to the ascendancy of woman. As in the best days of humanity, the future epoch will again offer woman her rightful place alongside her eternal fellow traveler and co-worker, man. You must remember that the grandeur of the cosmos is built by the dual origin. Is it possible, therefore, to belittle one element of it?" She translated the secret doctrine into Russian, and also claimed to receive regular communications from Master Moria, the master of Madame Blavatsky. Her first book, received from him, was The Leaves of M's Garden, 1924. In her letters, Helena clearly defines the difference between a clairvoyant and a medium. A clairvoyant is one who has raised the spinal serpent into the brain, and by his growth earned the right of perceiving the invisible worlds with the aid of the third eye, or pineal gland. The clairvoyant can become such only after years, sometimes lives, of self-preparation. On the other hand, the medium may secure results in a few days. Helena continued to receive telepathic communication from Master Moria, and wrote 13 books of Agni Yoga, also known as Teaching of the Living Ethics, over a period of 17 years, 1920 to 1937. She also wrote several volumes of letters. The Agni Yoga Society was founded in the mid-1920s, beginning informally as a group of students who gathered to study her book, Leaves of M's Garden. From 1924 to 1928, Helena joined her husband on a difficult expedition in search of Shambhala. She was the only woman who passed the whole extremely difficult itinerary. After Nicholas' passing in 1947, Helena strived to return to Russia. None of her appeals and submissions to the Soviet embassy were answered. She died October 4th, 1955.
As an appendix to this little documentary, I'd like to say that my teacher, Mother Jenny, was born on the same night of the same year in London that Helena Roerich was born in Russia. She passed away at the age of 97 years old. She was a great saint and teacher. I sat many days and many hours with a tape recorder with my teacher, Mother Jenny, gathering information about her life and development and biography, and have self-published this book called Mother Jenny's Garden.